This is episode 97 of the Christian Travelers Network. Today we'll be talking about embracing the daily adventure with Dan Zehner. Welcome to the Christian Travelers Network, where travel stories, community, and scripture combine. Hey, Christian Travelers, I'm so glad to have you here and to get to talk about some of the fun and exciting adventures that we get to go on in our daily lives. But before we dive into that, I want to once again point you to our website, christiantravelers.net. There you'll find other faith and travel resources, along with links to our ultimate travel kit, great for any retreats or other itineraries where you want to incorporate some faith-based elements, and then of course links to our Facebook, Instagram, etc. But without further ado, Dan Zehner is a husband and father of three adventurous kids who love to embrace adversity and the unknown. Whether that's through science and engineering, exploring his faith, or getting into the wilderness, especially on a mountain bike or in his Land Rover, Dan loves it all. Hey Dan, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good, Sarah. That's probably one of my favorite intros. So I really appreciate that.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into adventuring.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, husband and father, we got three kids, and they're a interesting and adventurous little bunch. um, my son Alex is 7, Jane is 4, and Felicity is 2. So we're constant noise and excitement and climbing trees in the yard and snowball fights right now with 8 inches of snow on the ground here in Indiana, things like that. It's a mix of fun and frustration, and adversity, which as I've been getting into kind of really what adventure means truly, it's all about persevering through the unknown and then finding fulfillment on the other side of it. And so I keep reminding myself when frustration comes with, whether it's toddler tantrums or kids fighting or stuff at work, it's those are opportunities for adventure, and getting through those helps us grow as people. Um, and so I kind of got into this way of seeing adventure through John Eldridge, like a lot of men have. When was it? About 3 years ago or so, I listened to Wild at Heart for the first time. Funnily enough, I was on a trip to Oregon for work, and so I started listening to it on the drive up to Mount Hood to go skiing for the day, before I got into my work trip. And it was like the perfect way to start. He talks about being in the wilderness and in the woods, and I'm driving up a mountain road. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it now, and I haven't looked back. And so it's gone from listening to that book to getting to talk to John, and praying through, like, what does adventure really mean for me, and especially as a man, and a man of faith, and then helping others do the same. And it's been really fun to see what's come out of that over the past few years.
What have been some of like your favorite adventure moments?
Oh my gosh, there's way too many. I'm gonna I'm gonna start with some more recent ones. Over the summer, um, I took my son and a couple of friends and one of their sons and my dad, up to Wisconsin to get out of the COVID crazy and do some social distance adventure. And we went on this trail called the Trans Wisconsin Adventure Trail. It starts in Galena, Illinois, goes all the way north to Lake Superior, and a great majority of it is gravel roads and sandy Forest Service roads, the further north you go, and nice country back roads. And it was just awesome. And as you mentioned in the intro, I own an old Land Rover. I've got a 2003 Discovery that I bought off of a wonderful guy who runs a company called Blue Ridge Overland Gear in Virginia. You should definitely check them out if you're into camping in a car. Shameless plug for them there. But anyway, so I was like, oh, finally, I'm gonna get the Rover out. We got a rooftop tent, all the things, and we're gonna go for 6 days. And it was just a absolute hoot. We're driving through creeks and finding interesting rock formations and camping out in fields where nobody was. And we got up to Lake Superior, and I remember my son going, "It's Lake Superior! Can we go? Can we go? Can we go?" And he like jumped in, and the water was freezing, and he's like, "This is awesome!" And it was, the sun was shining, and we got to take a car ferry over to an island in the lake, and uh, while we were out there, we went cliff jumping in a state park. We found a spot where the water was pretty deep, and you could jump off and climb back up really easily, and we had life jackets and everything. But it was just so awesome. I still remember his face because there was a couple other kids there jumping off the rocks, and he's like, "Are we gonna do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it. I'll go first, and then you can jump down after me." And you know, 3, 2, 1, go. And he went for it. It was it was just so awesome to see. My he was 6 at the time. I'm like, he's a 6-year-old jumping off a 12-foot cliff into a freezing cold lake. It was just amazing. Um, so those are some of the really fun moments. Oh man, this fall too. Uh, Another one in the Land Rover. I like to do solo trips with my kids individually, as well as some family trips too.
Mhm.
Because with 3 kids, sometimes, especially the middle one, can kind of get lost a bit.
Yeah.
So I took a trip with Jane, our middle daughter, down to the Shawnee National Forest. I hadn't been there since I was a kid, and it's in southern Illinois, if you're not familiar. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And we ended up staying at a hip camp on a farm that was just down the road from a winery, and a short drive away from some really nice hiking in a place called the Little Grand Canyon. So cool. And part of this adventure, we ended up running out of gas on the way to town, and like coasted to a stop and hoped that people would stop. I mean, I had an auxiliary gas tank with me, but it wasn't enough. And so, like, well, I guess I'm just gonna carry my daughter on my back and grab my gas can and hike the 3/4 of a mile to town and fill it back up. I'm like, no big deal. I trained for this kind of stuff, and thankfully someone stopped and gave us some gas, and it was fine. But then driving back to camp, we found this little r- barely road off the side of the main road there. I'm like, huh, that looks interesting. Let's drive down there and see what's there. And I'm like, hey Jane, you want to drive down there? She's like, sure, Dad, let's go. And we pull up, and I kid you not, there's a puddle about 40 feet long, and I don't know how deep because it goes all the way across the road. I'm like,
Huh.
oh, this is one of those moments where I'm actually gonna have to measure how deep this thing is before I drive into it. And so I get my axe out because I was camping and had that in the back of the truck, and so I put the handle down in the water, and it's a couple feet deep. I'm like, okay, we could do that. And we drive through it, and there's a big bow wave, in front of the Land Rover, and water's splashing over the hood. I'm like, oh man. And we go through another one, and the truck tips over at about 10 degrees, and I'm like, if I tip over here, we're so screwed. But we got through it, and I'm like, thank you, you crazy British people who built this wonderful truck to do stuff like this. I mean, they this kind of truck they would do back in the 80s through I think 2000. There was an event called the Camel Trophy. If anybody out there is interested in watching old trucks trudge through muddy jungles and things, our Land Rover went through that. And was just fine. So I'm like, I'm gonna be okay going through this little muddy road in the forest here. And we went through 3 or 4 different mud puddles of varying depths and splashed all over the place, and to great cheers from the back seat. And we ended up finding this kind of rickety, creepy campsite that was somebody was squatting on what used to be a cabin in the woods. Like you could see the remains of a foundation and a little bit of the fireplace left, and then a bunch of trash all over the place. I'm like, okay, this is where people get stabbed, so we're just gonna try and turn around. And we like go down the road a little bit further and find that there's trees across the road now, and I didn't bring a chainsaw. I'm like, okay, now I've got to make a 1,000,000 point turn in a Rover in the middle of the woods. So we turned around and everything was fine. But it was awesome. And oh my gosh, so these two stories are related in terms of where I find adventure a lot is going down these crazy back roads in Land Rover. On the way up to Wisconsin, there was a Forest Service road. I will never forget the names. Forest Road 327 in the Chequamegon Nicollet National Forest. And on this trip, we're listening to the audiobook of Morgan Snyder's book Becoming a King, which is fantastic and would highly recommend it if you haven't read it before. But there's a section in there about how adventure is where God has to show up. It's where we don't know what's going to happen, but He does, and we put ourselves in these situations where we can't rely on our own strength. We literally can't do it without Him. He has to show up. And as part of the book comes on, I turn onto Forest Road 327, which is barely wide enough for the truck, and it's 3 miles of rocks and puddles and the biggest clouds of horseflies I have ever seen. So yeah, some of the recent ones. I mean, I could go on for hours, but
Yeah, they sound great, and it sounds like you really enjoy kind of passing this heart of adventure on to your kids.
yeah, absolutely. I was talking to another guy actually on my podcast about old Land Rovers, and what makes the rover a rover is adversity, both your ability to get through it and its ability to inflict adversity upon you. Like right now, it's sitting in front of my house with a stone dead battery because it will drain overnight, and I have no idea why. And the back suspension is collapsed, and I need to replace it. Um, but the cool thing is, like, I've got a buddy with a lift. I'm gonna bring my son over. We're gonna make a day of it, and we're gonna put in suspension together. And like he gets to do that with dad, like handing me wrenches and bolts and springs that he can barely lift, and it's gonna be a blast.
That's awesome. And I want to backtrack. You mentioned when you were carrying your daughter to go get gas that you had trained for things like this. What
Oh
does that
yeah.
mean?
Oh yeah. So kind of my spectrum of adventure. There's three types, and they all kind of feed your soul in different ways. So casual adventures are things that are low risk that you can do every day, but still require you to persevere through some sort of suffering to be able to find some joy and fulfillment. And so for me, that's rucking. So getting a rucksack. Uh, I love everything Go Ruck. If you were actually, I have a Go Ruck T-shirt on right now. But they're a company that makes bags that are built for this, as well as steel plates to go in them. So I carry around a 30-pound steel plate pretty much everywhere I go, so that if I have to carry a 30-pound toddler for miles and miles, I have trained for it.
Nice.
So, so that's the casual adventures. The crucial adventures are the ones where an element of self-reflection comes in, either while you're there and like, oh, this just got big. Oh, something just happened, and I don't know if I can handle this like as a man anymore. Like, I don't know if I've got what it takes, because that's kind of our core question as men. Like, do I have what it takes? Like, can I come through? And so when that question comes into play, you've entered the realm of the crucial adventure. There's a higher risk there. And then there's the epic adventure, which a lot of people are going to think, oh yeah, it's going to Everest. It's hiking the Appalachian Trail. It's these big physical wildernessy things. And yes, those can be, but really it's anything where you have a high risk of emotions, of finances, or of the physical risk. And so that could be being a dad, being a mom, being married, having crucial conversations with a friend that you need to challenge on something that they're doing, or vice versa. And so having these three different ways of adventuring, like, and then being able to train for them is kind of my life's mission now. It's like, okay, I know that physically I can do just about whatever I want, but the emotional stuff is where
Mhm.
I'm really needing some training on. So I'm going to see a therapist and like working through some of my issues, and that's an adventure for me, because it's working on my capacity to risk, risk love, risk emotions, risk connecting with people.
Mhm. I like that for you, adventure isn't just travel, it's kind of all the risks in our life, big or small.
Yeah, because if it was just travel, you couldn't do it every day. Like, I can't go to Tahiti every day. I can't go to, um, you know, Africa every day. I can't even drive my Land Rover every day because it's broken half the time.
Yep.
So, if you can't find adventure in the everyday, a lot of who we are as people is lost.
Hmm. Yes, and I feel like with this pandemic, it's limited a lot of people's travel and a lot of people's sense of adventure. But to take advantage of the things that God gives you in everyday life is such a big part of, like you said, embracing who you are and all of that.
Yeah, and especially finding creative ways to embrace the limitations that are put on you in this season or any other season. There's still lots of adventure to be had in your own backyard. Like, I'm in the Midwest. I live in Indiana. Within about a 6-hour drive radius, I can get to um, some amazing lakes and wilderness and rock climbing and the Bourbon Trail, for gosh sakes. Like, you know, tons of stuff. Some of the best mountain biking in the Midwest is 4 hours away from me, and decent trails are even around here. A friend of mine once gave me a challenge of finding a region. Maybe it's your county, maybe it's your state, and doing everything within a category in that region, like finding every type of edible plant in your county, or you know canoeing every river in your state. Maybe not all of the river, but at least getting on each one. And you can totally do stuff like that in a COVID environment where, you're not supposed to gather with people and need to be distanced, whatever. Pick something like that of like, I'm going to go photograph every type of mammal in the state that I live. And so I've got to find out where they live and go there. And most likely, those are places that not a lot of people are going.
Yeah. That's really cool. But I have to say, I think there's a lot of people that kind of run from risk taking and they
Hmm.
run from adventure. What do you say to them?
Yeah, start small. Like, maybe for you, adventure isn't strapping on a heavy pack and going for miles and miles overnight, but it's learning an instrument or learning a craft or a new language. Maybe it's um, talking to that neighbor from Iran and learning about their country that you know nothing about, and their religion and their faith is very different from ours. So it's whatever. There's a really great book that I would recommend as well. Actually, I just started listening to it. A friend of mine, Alistair Humphreys, wrote one called "The Doorstep Mile," because that's really the hardest part of getting into a life of adventure is that first mile out your door, and then you're good. Like, after that, nothing can really stop you. But it's getting overcoming that inertia, uh, to use a engineering term. Once you get going, you're unstoppable. But it's finding ways to start small. You don't have to plan a trip to Death Valley to go hiking or something. It's okay. What's here? What's in front of me that is would require me to persevere a little bit. Maybe it's taking a martial arts class with my child. Like, I started to in taekwondo classes with my son a couple years ago, and frankly, after the first class, I don't know that I wanted to keep going because he was crying the whole time and was attached to my leg, wouldn't do anything. And neither of us were really sure that we wanted to keep going. And I told him, like, hey, we can decide to stop, but we can't quit.
Mm,
And so we're gonna give it a go one more time. We're gonna try again. And if you don't like it, that's okay. We can stop. But we're not gonna stop having not even tried. And we went back that second class. He was kind of looking around and like seeing if everything was okay, and kind of getting into things a little more. And now 2.5 years later, He can kick above his head, and he's doing weapons forms and sparring like a. You ever watch Star Wars? Do you
Yes.
remember Yoda in Episode 2 where he's like flipping and jumping around while he's dueling Count Dooku? That's my son in Taekwondo. He's a little whirling dervish. It's crazy.
Yeah. Are
And
you
and
still
that
taking it with him?
Yeah, yep. We're going to be testing for our red belt here in 4 weeks. So yeah, we're moving on towards it, our black belts, and we'll see if we keep going for another degree after that. Who knows? But um, it's just so much fun to see him growing as a little boy and and I'm getting a lot out of it too. I mean, it's a really great workout. And
Yeah.
you see the parents, and no judgment or anything, but you see the parents either sitting on the bleachers just on their phone, while their kids doing their thing, or they drop them off, and it's like that's a huge missed opportunity to get something for your own heart, but also to bond with your child too.
That is really cool. It goes back to that adventure being passed on. And that makes me think of our faith kind of being passed on as well. And that leads me to the question, how do you see adventure and faith kind of playing a part hand in hand?
Yeah, the big verse that I come back to constantly, and I need to put it like on a neon sign in my garage or something, but it's Romans 5:3. Like, not and it's all about how we glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And goodness knows we all could use some more hope right now. And this is a proven way to produce hope, is persevering through suffering and growing your character. And to me, that's adventure. The more I am able to put myself in situations where I need to persevere, or suffering through other things, like, okay, this is where I've got to lean on God's strength, and ask, like, hey, how am I going to get through this? And I definitely don't always do it well. Um, and even some days I give up, but pick myself up the next day and keep going. And so the more I lean into you know listening prayer and spiritual disciplines of um, you know, things like Sabbath and fasting, it's deepening my love of adventure as well as my relationship with Christ.
Are you looking for a faith based resource for your next travel adventure? Look no further than the Ultimate Travel Kit. This kit includes activities and supplies for large group, small group, and individual travel devotions. It is great for ages high school through retired adults, and it is very easy for leaders to incorporate around any travel itinerary. For more information, go to christiantravelers.net/ultimate travel kit. Yes, and it's almost like a muscle that has to be flexed. It has to be stretched and practiced to continue to grow at the same time.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, we can't do it alone either. We need a team with us. Like, I've been so impressed with my wife Tracy over the past few years, as I've grown in adventure. I've seen her grow in her own way too, and um, she's seeing that it's safe and it's okay to dream, to fail, to do things that are not quote unquote normal, and that I'm always going to be there for her, and that we're going to do this together, and that she's always going to be there for me when I don't want to get off the couch. She's like, hey, you haven't been outside today. You love being outside. What are you doing? Oh yeah, thanks. I'll be back in a bit. So, we support each other in this too, and it's been so cool to see. Starting this year, she's embracing the 1,000 hours outside movement. So trying to
Mm.
get our kids outside for 1,000 hours in 2021. So we have a big chart that I can't even remember where she printed it off, but it's like a 18 by 24 sheet of paper, um, with a really cool pattern that you can color in 1,000 spaces, and we're filling it in a little bit every day. And it's cool to see like a tangible um, way of seeing. Oh, this is our life. We are the kind of people who challenge each other to go outside as much as we can and see what's there, even when it's cold, even when it's raining.
I like that a lot, and I hadn't heard about that, so I'm gonna have to take a look at that as well. Is there anything else related to adventure that you want to address?
Hmm. I think the other thing is the balance of adventure and rest.
Mm.
Um, Especially in our society, we're like go, go, go all the time, and then we wonder when we get to our mid 30s and we're just tired, or later, Um, and so it's constantly checking in with your heart and asking, okay, God, what do I need today? Do I need to go for a mountain bike ride, or do I need a nap? you know, and allowing there to be a regular rhythm of you know adventure and exploration and challenge and discovery and Sabbath,
Mm.
rest and creativity and delight and sensuality. There's a couple of books that I love on that topic. One by Dan Allender called Sabbath, really really wonderful, focused on that, and another called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
Mm.
And that one I've found to be just as adventurous as some of the Land Rover and the Go Ruck Challenge and all the things, like challenging myself to be slow, to eat slower, to talk slower, to walk slower, to drive the speed limit, you know, to pick the long line at the grocery store checkout and not pull out my phone.
Mhm.
you know, like, and what I love about his challenges there is that it's training for our hearts to be patient, so that when all the disruptions of life come, we're already trained because we've been inconveniencing ourselves. So when we're inconvenienced by others, it's like, no big deal. Pull out my book, or I'll sit here in silence, and it'll be cool.
Yeah.
Extra 30 seconds at a red light, awesome. Traffic jam, cool. And so, there are adventurous pursuits in slowness, in stillness, um, that are just as worthwhile as flying down a hill on skis.
I think that's definitely not a perspective that we talk enough about as a culture, and it's good to remember that adventuring can be slowing down and taking our time.
Yeah, one story to just illustrate that point. One of my favorite parts of uh, one of my all-time favorite adventures, actually. So a good friend of mine is a retired Navy SEAL, super adventurous dude, 6'4", big muscular guy, deep voice, looks like he could break you in half, but he's a teddy bear. Anyway, so my buddy Larry invites me up to Minnesota um, to do some ice racing, basically going sideways fast in a car on a frozen lake.
Mm.
And I meet him at the airport, and I've been reading John Eldridge's new book, Get Your Life Back. And one of the pieces in there talks about the importance of embracing beauty as a way to feed our souls, and transitioning between things and not just trying to shift gears really fast. And so I was like, hey, Larry, this is going to sound really weird, but can we go to have a little bit of nature before we get into our crazy weekend? And there's a waterfall close by that'd be really cool. So near downtown Minneapolis, there's a place called Minnehaha Falls, which in the winter freezes over. So imagine a frozen wall of water over a little cave. It's amazing. And so we go there and we climb down and over some fences that had some signs on them telling me we shouldn't have, but no one was there. And we go behind this frozen waterfall and find this like alien world of blue and green and kind of this grayish light, and it it kind of took our breath away. And like, we weren't working hard, like, yeah, we could have slipped and fell on the ice, but it wasn't like crazy.
Mhm.
But we got back there and we were just able to appreciate nature and God's creation. And he's like, hey, I got to do my morning meditation today. You want to just pull up a rock and meditate for a while? Yeah, sure. So, we did some breath work together. We practiced Wim Hof breathing. So, kind of super oxygenating your blood, which gives you this really tingly feeling. And after a couple of minutes of that, like I noticed my body was kind of vibrating about the same frequency as the waterfall. There was a little bit of the waterfall still trickling through. I was like, God, how cool is it that you've created my body to be able to do this, and and that you've created this place, and my best friend is here, and you know, it was just an amazing physical, emotional, spiritual adventure. And I posted about it later, and my mom saw the post, and she's like, "Hey, you remember the last time you were there? It was when you were 10." I was like, "Oh man, yeah, I remember when I was 10. I was a doughy kid who was, you know, not confident or anything, and didn't feel like anybody liked him." Um, and God spoke to me very clearly there. He's like, "Hey, this is for 10-year-old Dan. Look what he was able to do now. He's able to bring a guy who's 10 years older than him, who is, a BA Navy SEAL, who loves you, into this space in beauty and adventure together. This is for you." And so, looking for those kinds of moments, that wherever those opportunities come up, like that's true adventure. And it doesn't have to cost anything, and it doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to look for it.
That's absolutely beautiful and such a cool thing that from the time you were 10 to now, like how much God has worked in your heart and changed your heart towards adventure too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, One of the questions I always love to ask our guests is what has been your biggest God moment in all of your travels?
Whew. Well, I think that was one of the top ones. Oh man. Okay, it's a toss up between two stories, so I'll go with one, and then if we have time, I'll tell the other one. So, um, uh, last year, right before everything locked down, like days before lockdown, um, I did a trip with a group of guys to go through. It's called the Wild at Heart Basic. So it's 4 days. You go through a series of sessions with the Wild at Heart team via video, and it's really awesome. And we went to a an Airbnb on a horse ranch in Tennessee for it, and it was just amazing 4 days of wrestling with our hurts and wounds of the past and spiritual warfare. Like I literally prayed over a guy there. So that one of the sessions is on spiritual warfare, and one of the guys got sick, like right before that session. Like he was dealing with some spiritual stuff, and I was like, okay, this is a chance to like put my money where my mouth is here, and like prayed over him, and like we prayed through some wounding and like agreements that he was making with things that weren't himself. And like we actually saw him get better over the course of a few hours. And he was like, yeah, it was totally because of that prayer that we prayed together. Like, man, that was cool. And then the end of the weekend, so every morning there was a facilitator's briefing, so a special video just for me and the other guy who were running the event. And John Eldridge and his team, talked to you about kind of what to expect for the day and how to prepare. And that last day, he was like, it was just John, straight on in the face, like, well done, like you did it. And it was like God Himself was saying it to me, because He was. And um, you know, I hadn't heard the well done kind of message too much from my dad directly. I mean, I know he feels it, and he just doesn't express it always. Um, but like until that moment, I hadn't heard that very often from him, and it was really healing to hear that from God through John on a video. Um, Another one was over the course of about a year preparing for another adventure and then getting to go on it. I'm a I would say I enjoy history. I'm not quite a history nut, but especially World War II is just really interesting time period for me. And um, there was an opportunity to do an endurance event called the Go Ruck Challenge on Omaha Beach in Normandy for on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I'm like, that would be amazing, but I have no idea how we're going to do that. And so Go Ruck, the company, posted about it. Their CEO posted about how awesome it was going to be, and I kind of jokingly replied in the comments of like, haha, I'll just bring my three kids and we'll go. And he replied back like, yeah, you should. I'm going to bring my kids too. I'll see you there. Okay. Like, we're about ready to have a baby in a couple of months, and I'm like, she's going to be 8 months old by the time we do this. This is insane. And so he and I talk over Facebook a few times about logistics and like how to talk to my wife about this, and you know, I talked to his wife about it, and like, are you really bringing your kids? Like, yeah, we're going to bring them, and like, okay, our kids are going to be making sandcastles on Omaha Beach together. This is going to be cool. And we kind of became friends over that. And then my wife's in the hospital delivering our third child, Felicity, and I remember messaging with Jason McCarthy, is the CEO of GoRuck, and he's a dad too. He's got three kids, and he was like, "All right, here's the time to use your GoRuck training. Don't fall asleep on her. Drink your coffee outside. Bring her ice chips. Like you got this." Like, this guy's got a CEO of a not big company, but pretty successful, and he's got a lot of other things going on, but he's spending the time to you know let me know that he's got my back. Like, this is so cool, and it's definitely a God moment. And then God was really working through this whole thing of a couple months later, I was finally ready to have the conversation with Tracy. I'm like, hey, do you want to go to France in June? She's like, what? And like, yeah, it'd be really cool. And we prayed over it together. We both felt like, yeah, we should do this and we should save up for it and learn French a little bit, at least enough to survive. And over the course of the next few months, we just decided, both us and the McCarthys were like, okay, we're not going to bring all our kids. That would be insane. But we thought we'll bring the baby because she's the hardest to leave with anyone for 10 days. And we went. We brought our 8 month old across the Atlantic Ocean, and into a country where we barely spoke the language, and drove from Paris to Normandy and stayed in a shed on a farm. And then I did this event where I got up at 4 in the morning with some German guys that I camped out with on Omaha Beach the night before. And, we put our steel plates in our rucksacks and our 3 liters of water and a couple of snacks for the day, and we literally get into the North Atlantic where the invasion took place at the time that it would have happened 75 years ago if there wouldn't have been a storm. So it was on June 5th, not June 6th. But it was eerie, but like a total God moment of like, this is the world we live in. We are in a world at war that we cannot see. And the way to fight that war is by banding together with like-hearted men and women who want to do the work of the kingdom together and doing it as a team and charging like crazy people out of the surf and onto the beach and taking territory. And it's not the trained soldiers who are doing this. It's like grandmas and normal guys like me and kids, and like, who does that, sending in this ragtag invasion force in like to do their work? Well, God does. And so it was a hugely impactful moment of realizing, like, not only was this an amazing moment of history that I got to get a taste of, but like, this is the way the world really is. It's not the Zoom meetings and social media posts and others, daycare and all the other stuff, that's mortgages. It's we're in the invasion force. It's Saving Private Ryan. It's you know that's what's going on in the spiritual realm, whether we realize it or not. And so, yeah, it was hugely impactful to get to experience that.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I love how God spoke to you through both of those events to remind you that we are just servants on this planet, adventuring and going through the motions of so many other things, but it's really ultimately about how we are serving Him.
Yeah. And just a final thing on the Normandy trip and just kind of in general, how important it is to remember these trips, especially when we can't travel. Like
Mm.
I've got a jar of sand that a friend of mine sent me because I forgot to bring any sand home from the beach. I got a couple of pebbles, but every time I look at this jar of sand on my desk, I'm like, as a reminder, like you can do hard things. God loves you, and He's going to fight for you, and He wants you to fight with Him, not against Him, but partner with
Yeah.
Him. Um, and it's just really important to have these tangible reminders. So yes, I advocate leave no trace principles when you go out into the woods, of course, but when you can, bring maybe a little stick or a rock or uh, just pictures from your adventures and reflect on them often because we forget really quickly um, just the impact of those experiences and to have that tangible reminder when when it's gray outside and it's raining and you know kids are sick and work is calling you and there's fires that you got to put out and people are mad at you like yeah, that happened and I got through that hard thing, that adventure. I can get through this too.
Amen. Well, Dan, thank you so much for being on our episode today. Please share with our guests how can they connect with you outside of this episode?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Anthem of the Adventurer, or our website as well, anthemoftheadventurer.com, or same thing on Facebook would be the three ways to find me. And coming in a couple of months here, we're going to be revamping a lot of that to be way more effective with my new business partner, Jeff. So look for some new stuff there. And if you're a like-hearted person like our new friend Sarah here, and want to contribute, we're looking for writers who want to contribute to a blog regularly and write about um, their faith and adventure and how that kind of shows up in their lives. So definitely drop us a line, DM on Instagram, or shoot me an email. Um, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We'll make sure to put links to that in the description below. We've really enjoyed your encouragement and adventuring in all the different levels of risk that come with that in travel and in our personal lives.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Well, Christian travelers, I hope that you have been inspired and I hope that you will go check out Dan Zehner's Anthem of the Adventurer and check out those links below. Also, if you want to look for something similar, you can check out our episode 73, Facing Pain with Courage from Joe Patterson. He tells of some crazy adventures hiking through the forest and how God spoke to him quite literally. That if he didn't make it out that night, he might not have made it out at all. Additionally, you can head to our website, christiantravelers.net, to book your next trip and leave us a review. Until next time, safe travels and God bless.